Good afternoon. My name is Chief Mark Lewis of the Cambridge Police Department. We've called this press conference today to discuss some of our violent crime increases that we've been experiencing here in the city. Over the past several months, those violent crimes have been on the increase. As recently as this past weekend, we've had 2 homicides. My message is to the citizens of Cambridge. Please know that our police department is doing everything humanly possible to make sure that these crimes do not occur in the future. We have done major shifts to our operations to put more officers out on the street to curb such violence. We have implemented a tip line, which was 228 drug, which is 228-3784. So citizens can call in and give that information to the police department and they can remain completely anonymous. We need the citizens' support and help in some of these crimes. We know for a fact there's persons that have witnessed these incidents occur, and we need their help so we can solve these crimes. Today I have the Mayor of Cambridge, Mayor Victoria Jackson-Stanley, with us for full support. City Manager Patrick Komisky, State Attorney William Jones. But first I'd like for Captain Todd, who is our operations commander, to come up and give you some information on those crimes that have been occurring. I do want to say to the ones that are responsible for these crimes, you are not welcome in our community, and we will do everything that we can do, use whatever resources that we can muster to find you, identify you, and prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming out. For those who don't know me, I'm Captain Justin Todd, Cambridge Police Department. I'm in charge of the operations of the police department, along with the Internal Affairs Division and also Public Information Officer for the department. Before I get started, I want to thank everyone for the social distancing guidelines that we follow to keep everyone safe. So I do appreciate that and everyone following. As many of you know, and as the chief has just spoke, there's been a uptick in the aggravated assaults and crimes within our city of Cambridge. So I'm going to give you just some statistics of what is going on in our city, where we're at with things compared to a year ago, to give the public and everyone a little bit of an idea. Since January of this year, we have had 16 stabbings, 12 shootings with victims. And as you are aware, this past weekend was a very violent weekend. We had multiple stabbing victims, and we had 1 shooting, which resulted in the death of a gentleman. In that incident, resulting in the stabbing and murder of a suspect, we were able to obtain a suspect. We are hopeful that that subject will be arrested and charged accordingly. And in regards to the shooting incident, we have obtained information, and we feel like we're definitely on the right track in that investigation. And hopefully we'll be able to provide a little more information to you as we go along throughout our investigation. And we'll keep you up to date on that. Just to give you an idea of the amount of increase in crime over the last year, our aggravated assaults in 2019, we had a total of 87. And this year we are at 120 as of today's date. So you can definitely see the increase of crime there. And aggravated assaults are anything that involves weapons, any brutal attack that can lead to a felony charge of some type. Robberies are also up throughout the city. I believe last year we had a total of 18 This year, as of today's date, we have a total of 28. And you might find that interesting that some of these robberies are being committed by juveniles, as well as motor vehicle thefts are up to 34 this year compared to 19 last year. So again, some of these are juvenile crimes. The chief mentioned the drug tip line. A lot of the crimes we go to and these types of serious incidents, it's very hard for us to be able to obtain some information that we need to obtain. People do not want to communicate with the police. I want to stress that tip line, and you can remain anonymous. You can provide information. It gives the investigators a chance to be able to follow that lead. And if it leads to something, that's wonderful. If it doesn't, then we can rule that out. That's part of our investigation. We have a great working relationship with the State's Attorney's Office, and Mr. State's Attorney William Jones is here today. From the moment we have a serious incident, they are on the scene with us almost. We are going back and forth, doing everything we can to help make sure that we are doing our part for the city of Cambridge to get these crimes solved. We just need a little bit of extra assistance and the communication from members of the community to get that job done. Again, I appreciate it. Thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to our mayor, Ms. Victoria Jackson-Stanley.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I first want to express my condolences to the families that have been victimized in so many ways by the unspeakable violence that has gripped our community recently. It's not acceptable. I condemn the violence that's going on in our community right now. And I ask the community to please step forward and get involved with helping our police department solve these unspeakable crimes. I want to thank the chief and his staff for taking this opportunity to go forward with the press, to be transparent about what's going on here in Cambridge. It is not with pride that I speak of what's happening right now, but it's with resolve that I support our police department, and I ask you also to do the same. As been the statistics given, we are on an uptick with the crime. And I say again, I condemn the crimes. I condemn what's happening in our community because it is unspeakable that we would lose lives on our soil, our young people. But I also know that we are better than this. The late Elijah Cummings, congressman out of Baltimore, said it, and I believe it within my heart that we are better than this. So I want to just express my support of our police department to tell our citizens that we need to get involved to do better than this, to help our police department do their job and to protect and serve us all. I won't be very long, but I do want to say that these statistics are very heart-wrenching for me. It is heart-wrenching because I know a lot of the people that were victimized here. One victim was indeed a relative of mine. And when I spoke with that mother, she had unspeakable grief about the loss of her child. And I can relate to that because I also have a family member that I would hate to see lost to something like this. Nothing that I can control, but I can control myself and ask, again, please get involved. As I take my seat, I want you to know that the City of Cambridge and the Police Department of Cambridge are all on one accord to solve these crimes, to protect our community, and to provide outreach as needed. But we as citizens of Cambridge also have to do our part. If you see something, say something. Be safe, but please let us know what we can do to protect ourselves. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is William H. Jones. I have the privilege of serving as the elected state's attorney for Dorchester County. I just have a few comments regarding what's going on and what we are doing moving forward. Captain Todd mentioned the Saturday night episode. I would tell you that that is an investigation that is proceeding very well in the sense of our ability to understand what events transpired and who the responsible people were. I am limited in my ability to share information. I believe that there will be much more information coming in the next day or two. I would say that based on the investigation, as I understand it, that I do not believe that coming from that case, that there's a current threat to public safety. And so the public, I believe, should not have to worry about the facts in that case spilling over into new violence. I'd like to say that as the state's attorney, I support the efforts and the initiatives of the police department. We have a chance to work collaboratively. We work hand in hand, not only in cases, but in sort of the day-to-day operations as we talk about these things. And something we have to understand here, I went to the police academy myself in 1988, and I had a professor from Virginia who came in and taught us, and she said one thing: you cannot have freedom without order. And I didn't really understand what that meant, but quite simply, if we don't have order in our society and on our streets, then you have no freedom. You can't leave your home, you can't go to the store. And so establishing and maintaining that order is essential for us to be able to enjoy our lives. And I say that because there's something here we have to understand. Much of the violence here is gun related. There are far too many guns on the streets of Cambridge. And we have to understand that those guns are not going to turn themselves in. The police officers have to go out there and get them. They have to utilize the techniques and laws and policies and procedures and strategies available to them to get the guns off the streets. And unfortunately, we live at a time, and I understand where this comes from, there are calls to neutralize the police, defund the police. Let's understand that without the police, we are not going to get these guns off the street. And these dedicated officers have to go out there and get them, and they're performing and engaging in very dangerous activities to do that. And the public has to understand that if we don't support the officers and their efforts, then nothing's going to change. Now, in this climate, I also understand that there are concerns about the police. People, George Floyd, things are happening across the country. I understand where these things come from. I can tell you that as prosecutors, we have the opportunity, responsibility, to review the conduct of police officers regularly. We are working with police to make sure that what happens here in Dorchester County is what I refer to as constitutional policing, that the officers engage in activities and procedures, and tactics that are authorized by the Constitution and that are fair to all involved. And we will make sure here, we will continue to make sure that the police officers here engage in that constitutional policing. If we see a case that comes from a bad search, we'll get rid of it. We're here to protect the rights of all citizens. And as part of that, we will make sure that the officers do their jobs, and they're doing it well. I don't have any complaints about their officers' jobs. Certainly we come in and we talk about some things from time to time, things that could be done better, concerns that we might have. That's the nature of this business. But we have to understand that they are doing a good job, but we have to support them and not criticize each and everything that these officers do. Now, as prosecutors, we have a responsibility to be involved. I can tell you that my philosophy as a state attorney is that the prosecutors in my office play an integral part in keeping the streets of Cambridge and Dorchester County safe. And the way we do that is to remove those most violent offenders from the streets. Simply put, and I hear judges say all the time, and I've heard judges say to some offenders, the only way I can make sure that you are not a threat on the streets of Cambridge is to remove you, to put you in prison. Sometimes that's what we have to do. As part of that, we are very involved from the beginning of these major crimes, and we work with the police officers and detectives to make sure that they have the necessary resources, both in terms of legal theory as well as investigative techniques, to make these cases and make these cases good. I can tell you that, as the captain said, we have primarily 3 violent crimes prosecutors, including myself, and in these big cases, these major cases, we get involved right away. My phone rang 1:15 Sunday morning, I got up and went. I had a prosecutor out most of Friday night with a homicide that transpired there. We get involved at the very beginning, and we cooperate and assist where we can in the investigation and the charging and the prosecution of these cases. The prosecution is very important because it doesn't do us any good for the officers to make a good arrest and charge someone if we don't get good results in court. We have open cases that we continue to work on. I get some calls from time to time, even recently, about open homicides. We're still working on two. And I can tell you that we work with the detectives every day on those open cases. So just because there happens to be one that has not been solved and or charged, the public shouldn't think that the officers and my prosecutors aren't working on that, because we are working on those cases each and every day. Finally, let me say this. I've received information, and it's been alluded to previously, that people come from out of town to Cambridge to create a lot of our problems. Salisbury, Delaware, Baltimore, doesn't matter. For whatever reason, people seem to think from time to time that this is the place to come to commit those crimes. I'm here to tell you, as the state attorney for Dorchester County, that's a mistake. Anyone who thinks that this is the place to come and commit a crime is making a mistake, and we will hold those persons accountable for those mistakes. Thank you. I believe we're also available to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. State's Attorney. Yes, that would conclude, and we will take any questions that you may have and answer to the best of our knowledge.
I just heard the state's attorney mention something about a homicide Friday. I don't know if that was in the city of Cambridge or somewhere else.
That was the stabbing that occurred in the 700 block of Douglas Street. I believe that's the one that's.
Okay, so it was fatal.
Yes.
Because I think last we knew it, we didn't know the situation of the victim.
Yes.
The condition.
He did succumb to his injuries, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And we have an active warrant for the subject who did that.
Okay. Sorry, it was a male who was stabbed?
Yes, it was a male.
Okay.
Do you have an estimate about what percentage of crimes is coming from elsewhere, people from elsewhere? I've heard that complaint.
I do not have those statistics.
I'd say it's somewhat anecdotal, but we just get a lot of that information.
Can you give a number to how many stabbings we saw just from this past weekend and like Friday?
There was a total of 3 stabbings since Friday.
And one of them was
One of them was fatal. Another case, we have an actual arrest warrant in that case as well. However, the subject's a juvenile, and we cannot release that information.
I don't know, sorry.
It's okay.
I feel like maybe one of the reasons that people may be hesitant, at least we were out speaking to some people earlier today, it seems that people may be hesitant to come forward because maybe they don't even know really the whole situation that happened. And even on our end as members of the press, we're not often receiving press releases from the department in a very timely manner. So and I know that there's very limited information sometimes that you guys can give out, but do you think at all that maybe more transparency with the community in general might help not only people feel more comfortable, but just get the word out about the situations?
Yeah, and that's a very good question, and I'm glad you asked that. There are certain investigations require us to withhold certain information. So we give out the best we can, what we can, and try to follow that up as it goes on throughout the investigation. Certainly if it's a threat to the public, we try to get the information out there as soon as we possibly can. As far as people coming forward and may not know the whole, any information they can give is greatly appreciated. We know that everybody in the community, they have to live with one another, their neighbors, you know, they have to live in the city of Cambridge. And we know how tough it is for them. But we want to get the message out that they can remain anonymous and they can give whatever information they have to give, and we'll follow that up.
Can you give examples of tips that might be helpful, maybe something small that someone doesn't think is helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as simple as someone saying they saw somebody running from the scene with an orange sweatshirt and a pair of blue jeans. You know, something that simple. We might not have had that information. We may have, but at least that's getting that information to us.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I know this conference isn't about this issue, but it's certainly connected. But about bike boys, the recent maybe increase, or maybe it's just being noticed more about young people on bikes in the streets. I'm not saying it's connected to this, but it is connected in the sense that its tensions are high. I wondered if anybody had any comment on the bike boys situation.
Yeah, and that comes from, and I mentioned earlier in reference to some of the juvenile crimes we've had and some of the juvenile things. You know, the situation with the kids on the bikes in the streets, yes, they are committing, you know, traffic hazards, but we're trying to get to those people and educate the juveniles that are doing that. You know, we feel that we don't want to go out there and lock up all the kids and make arrests. And are we really solving anything by doing that? No, we're not solving anything by doing that. But if we can create a dialogue with these juveniles, the ones that are doing it, and let them understand what we do and understand what they're doing wrong and what they can do, you know, I think we're working in that right direction. I think that the chief, the city council are working on things that we're trying to get the whole community involved. Yes, sir.
Does anyone have any comment about the prospect of positions being unfrozen or staffing or getting more officers on the street?
Chief, you want me to? Chief Lewis will respond to that.
The city council last night met in open session and approved, we had, as part of the budgetary process, we had 5 officer positions that were frozen due to the COVID budget situation. But after council meeting last night, they did go ahead and approve to open up those positions for us. To give you an idea, 10 years ago, 2010, we were at 52 officers. Today on the street, we have 38. So it's a 14 officer difference. That's basically, we've lost in 10 years a quarter of our police department that we had in 2010. And a lot of that had to do with the financial crisis of 2010. We had to cut positions to make things work. But we're in that situation now where we need those extra officers to do and perform the functions that we need to do for the city. We're doing a lot more with a lot less officers. So, and I thank the city manager and the mayor and the commissioners for giving us those positions back. And hopefully we can get them filled very quickly. Thank you.
I have a question for the mayor and possibly the chief too. I know when talking to some folks, there have actually been people going out in like prayer faith walks, kind of taking matters into their own hands. What would you say to these folks who feel like they've kind of been lost with the police and the city trying to work together? They kind of felt left out in a way, especially when it comes to the safety of their neighborhoods.
Well, I tell you, we are always open to that dialogue. We have a great community policing unit that we have POW, we have all these programs out there that we're trying to bring the community together to bridge that gap, to make a better relationship between the police and our citizens. We all live here, we all work here, we have to coexist. So making those relationships better only helps us in the long run. You have to build those relationships long before a major incident happens, because if you wait until something bad happens to try to get everybody together, it's too late. You're way behind, you're lost. So those relationships are very important, and we are open to them. Those prayer walks, every group that wants to get involved, we welcome it. Thank you.
And thank you for the question. I would like to add to that, because I believe in prayer. I believe that prayer changes things. And as I understand the purpose of the gatherings, they are praying for the city, and for the healing of the city, and for the reduction or the elimination of the violence that we're all facing right now. The communication and relationship with the police department and the mayor and council are relationships that have to build over time, and I think there's some repairing that needs to be done based on the information I'm getting from a lot of people. But a prayer vigil or a prayer walk is about prayer, that you pray for something. And as I said, I believe in prayer, and I just ask again, and I ask all the time since 2008 when I assumed this awesome position, pray for the city of Cambridge. Pray for the people of Cambridge. Pray for the leadership of Cambridge, that we may do a good job. And if prayer vigils give them, meaning the people of the crowd or the organization, if it gives them strength to continue to do their work for the good of the Cambridge, I'm all for that. If I'm available, I always join, but I can't always be available. But continue to pray. Thank you.
Ron?
Thank you, Kevin. I know this might involve a little bit of opinion or speculation, but do you have any ideas on why this is happening now? If we're seeing more aggravated assaults in the last year, and it's such an increase, a noticeable increase over the previous two, why is that happening? Is it societal pressures or the economy? What do you think?
You know, that's another good question. A lot of these crimes are completely unrelated. Do we believe maybe some of the recent shootings and such that we've had throughout the year so far has one or two of them may be related to one another? Sure, there's that possibility out there. But to answer that question, I honestly don't know that to be able to give you a complete answer as to why. You know, one reporter I spoke to earlier today asked me, was it because we're so short on police officers? Yes, we are down manpower. And yes, we need more officers on the street. We need more officers to be able to do the things we want to do for the community, not only crime-wise, but community-wise, to be able to do the events we want to do and bridge that gap, as the mayor and the chief has spoke about. But I can't say that some of these random acts, such as the stabbings this weekend, unless we were right there at that very moment, we would have stopped that. You know, that's something I can't answer.
Thank you.
Yes,
Do you
ma'am.
all think the shortage in staffing may be causing a slower, I guess, end results in the investigation?
I don't believe it's causing a slower result in our investigation. I can tell you that this past weekend, we as the Cambridge Police Department and the chief made the decision that we have so many detectives, only so many detectives, and they were bombarded with so much crime that has gone on in so many cases that they were working, that when the shooting occurred, we made the decision along with Mr. State's Attorney to call in the Maryland State Police Homicide Unit to assist us. And I think our number one priority with that is if we have a victim of a crime and we have something, an act that serious, we as the police department, state's attorneys, we have to do what we have to do to make sure we're investigating everything fully and nothing goes unturned. And if that's calling in another agency to assist us, that's what we're going to do.
I have a two-part question. Number one, I know talk about unfreezing those officer positions. How soon can we see those officers come on board here? And the second part to that is, we know that community policing has often been talked about. How much of that is community policing and how much of that is actual just cops getting a job done?
Community policing, we have officers in our community policing division, and they are constantly working. You've heard of the trunk or treat. You've heard of pumpkin carving we did just in the last couple weeks. They're doing all that. That's what they go out there and they do. We have substations out there, so many different things where we go and meet with the elderly and give tips this time of year, usually for crime and such like that. So we have a community police, we want that community policing division to grow. And that's what, in hopes of getting these positions filled, that's what we want to be able to incorporate and get more officers in that division. And if you had a second part, if you could just repeat that.
Oh, yeah, like how soon and possibly.
Okay.
Those 5 positions, I've advised the council that we would try to fill them with certified officers, which means we would be able to put them on the street fairly quickly. If we have uncertified applicants, we would have to wait till the next police academy, which would be July at the latest of 2021. But those 5 positions are going to be dedicated solely for our community policing unit. So that's where we need to make the difference. Yes, ma'am.
And the 5 officers that you're looking to add, that would bring it up to 43 total?
Those 5, plus we have 2 that we're hiring now, plus 1 in the police academy, it'll bring us to 46. That's our authorized strength.
Sir, is there any framework in place, particularly in crunch time, to have any kind of memorandum of understanding with any other agency to come help out? Particularly if you have a weekend like this where it's just, for some reason, it's lots of going on.
That's correct. We have, based upon all of this, we've always had a good working relationship with Sheriff Phillips and the Sheriff's Office, Easton Barrack, Maryland State Police. I've reached out to both commanders and asked, due to these high crime times in areas, that they provide some extra patrols to help our officers out, and they have agreed to do so. So we are going to use every resource that we have available to us, whether it's calling in ATF for these gun violations, our gang task force through the state police, whatever we need to do to get these streets under control, that's what we're going to do.
I do have one final question.
Yes, ma'am.
Just because I'm not sure maybe what we have heard of that happened maybe just over the past week and what hasn't. I don't know if there's a way you could just give us a rundown, like the 20th we had a robbery, the 21st we had a robbery, the 22nd an armed robbery, just because I don't know if we even know how much has happened.
Well, I can tell you, without having anything in
Yeah.
front of me, last week we had 2 robberies of pizza delivery guys. We were able to make 2 arrests in that. One of those robberies involved, they beat the pizza delivery person and stole his vehicle. We were able to make 2 arrests in that case and connect them with the other armed robberies that we were having at that time. Then Friday night, of course, we had the stabbing inside the vehicle on Cedar Street, which we had warrants for. We had the stabbing on Douglas Street, which resulted in a homicide, which we have active arrest warrants for the subject for that. And then we had a 3rd stabbing on Pine Street early Saturday morning, early Saturday morning, which that one is still open. And of course then the homicide early Saturday morning, Sunday morning.
So 3 homicides?
2. 3 stabbings, 2 homicides.
Okay.
And can you just repeat what the tip line is, the number?
It's 410-228-DRUG. That's 410-228-3784. And they can provide their information. They don't have to give their identity. Their numbers aren't tracked. There's no caller ID. It's a way for them to provide information to us, and we can take it from there. We're just looking for that little bit of information, and that little piece that they may have may be able to allow us to solve that crime.
Mark, I had one last thing, just to follow up, 2 things, because I think that they are important. One is the assistance from the allied agencies, just to comment on that, because that's incredibly important. When I arrived at one of these scenes, there were 2 sheriff's deputies who committed hours to protecting that scene. So Sheriff Phillips has been very generous, because the citizens of Cambridge are also citizens of Dorchester, and he serves all of them, and we've had access to their resources. The Maryland State Police sent somewhere around 8 investigators for one of these homicides, and so they have been very good in providing the resources to all of the citizens, not just the areas that they primarily protect. There was a question about the causes of these things, and one of the things that's important to understand is that there is no one cause. Lack of economic opportunity. We'll never know how many crimes come from a lack of economic opportunity. The randomness in terms of people who sometimes have mental health or anger issues that sometimes spill over into these types of things. Competing factions, groups of people that engage in retaliatory actions back and forth, and that's something that we certainly see here as well as other places. And something that I think that it's really important to notice is that across our nation right now, unfortunately, there is a general sense of lawlessness that I see, not just here, but every place. A lack of respect for law enforcement, a belief that people don't have to follow the laws, a belief that things don't apply to them. All of their officers wear body-worn cameras, and we have access to that system. We watch them in all these cases. And I dare say you would be shocked to see how these police officers are treated by the public in general, and the people who refuse to display any respect for them. And when you see that, you begin to understand how these things unfold. And that's why I will finish with what I said earlier. We have to support and respect these police officers, because if we don't, then they are not going to be able to do their jobs. And if they aren't able to do their jobs, then this lawlessness will just continue. And when I talked about freedom, we won't have any, because we'll all be afraid to leave our homes. So we support the police officers, we give them the tools necessary, we understand that they will do their jobs in a proper constitutional way, and when they are able to do that, and people are able to understand that in a civilized society, we all have to treat each other with respect, then things will be safe again. Thank you.
Anybody have anything else?
I have one final question.
Yes, ma'am.
Something just keeps popping up. I don't know how you guys keep track of all of this, because this isn't, I guess, necessarily, we don't need to record it or anything, just to know that has the shortage of officers and the increase of crime recently, has that created a lot of overtime for the department?
Yes, of course, absolutely. Our officers are working lots of overtime. Our detectives, once they're on a case, they could work hours on end. And part of the reason why calling in an allied agency to assist us was because simply we've had detectives out and officers out all weekend long with very little rest. So yes, overtime does become a factor when you're shorthanded and your manpower is not where it needs to be to get things done. Yes, sir.
The city has moved to, obviously, to alleviate some of the manpower concerns. But while we're, making, trying to solve this, are there other technological things that could, force multiply, like static things like surveillance, or other things that could give the police department more capabilities in preventing or deterring or solving crimes?
Yeah, we have, there's quite a number of surveillance cameras throughout the city, and we know where most of them are. And in fact, we spoke with our community policing division this morning to be able to map out, go around and map out exactly every business that has a camera, where it's at, where it's facing. That way, so when we get a crime in a certain area, we don't have to go search for the camera system. We'll know that, well, this business has a camera system, and it'll shorten our investigation. But yes, that technology is big in investigations today, and we use that a lot, and I know Mr. State's Attorney would agree, to solve cases today, that goes a long way.
Are there things that will be on your wish list that you don't have right now? I know drones have been mentioned before, that type of thing.
Yeah, drones, definitely, yeah, it's a lot of things like that, such as the drone program that we would love to eventually get up and running, that would help us deter crime, prevent crime, know where crime's happening at, and also safety for our officers as well. And surveillance, any type of surveillance equipment, that type of thing is always a big resource for us. But right now, as the city, and we need the manpower, and I think we've taken a step in the right direction to get that. Now we just have to get the officers employed and on the street, and we'll look forward to doing that.